All right, I think we are going live. All right, hello everybody. I think we're live. Can you hear me? Um, are we good? Put it in the chat, please. Hello everybody. Hello. All good? Everyone can hear? Okay, we can hear it. Jam, can you? Oh, Jam, can you talk?
Yep, how's this?
All right, everyone can hear Jam as well? Okay, we're just gonna go. All right, hello everybody. My name is Brandon. This is another live stream, kind of casual. We're just hanging out. Jem is a wonderful vegan activist. You probably know her. If you don't, I will. Her channel is linked in the live stream and stuff, so definitely follow her. Do you want to introduce yourself or say something?
Yeah, so I'm Gem Lettuce. I've been making animal rights content for consistently for about I'll say 6 months, but then I think 2 months has gone by since then, so maybe like more 8 months.
Okay.
Been vegan for maybe 3 years in November. So still fairly new to things, I guess. And yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. Now I just need to get something kind of straight right off the bat. Is your real name Lettuce? That's your real last name?
No,
No. Okay.
no.
All right. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. That's what I figured. So, because there are some names like, do you mind sharing the area you're from? Are you in the UK?
UK, yeah, Midlands in the UK.
Okay. So I'm not familiar with UK last names, so I didn't know if that was like a UK thing, but I figured it had to do with the vegan thing. Okay. Cool. Um. So yeah, really glad you were able to join. The reason why I ask you to join this live stream is we both do pretty similar stuff. I noticed most of your content, if not all of it, is pretty much vegan outreach, similar with mine. And yeah, I figured we could talk all about vegan activism, vegan out, like specifically outreach, like on the street, talking to people. And yeah, maybe it'll help people. Maybe we'll just get a little therapy session about it. Who knows? So figured it'd be fun. Um, Now you said you've been vegan for about 3 years. You said
Almost 3 years,
almost
yeah.
3 years. So you kind of got into activism like right away, pretty much. It took me
Yeah.
like over 6 years before I was like, okay, I'm gonna go and do this. So do you mind sharing just a little bit about how like what got you into animal rights or vegan activism?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think like I kind of had, I would say, like absorbed as much information about veganism and learned so much about it within like the space of 2 weeks. So probably as much as one person could like learn or absorb in the space of like years, because when I sort of went vegan and I had that like, it sounds that the thing that everyone says like the penny drop moment, but
Mm-hmm.
it is literally a penny drop moment that you have. um yeah, it kind of, I was just like absorbed by it because it totally like just shocked me. I had this like massive realization, um and I was just like, oh my god, this is so obvious. Like, what have I been doing? Like, everything just suddenly started making sense in my life, and it was, yeah, it for me, for like a 2 week period, I just like absorbed and learned so many things, and it just like completely blew my mind. I learned about like, all the practices and the ethical, environmental, health sides of things. Obviously not related to veganism, but they can be sort of benefits of being vegan. And yeah, I kind of like absorbed everything so quickly, and I was constantly like, I need to do more. I need to do more, from like the get go, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think I'd had maybe like so much guilt from like my past, like, oh my God, I've been doing this for so many years and stuff. And I like really connected with the animals, and I just felt like I had to get in there straight away. Um, so I think it was like I went vegan in the November. I think it was like 2021, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to my first cube in January.
Okay. Wow.
Um, yeah, but I joined, that was the first one that I could make since I joined the Facebook group. But yeah, I mean, even now, still, I'm always just like, what else? What else? I think that there's never like enough well, me personally, that I can do. Like, there's never enough that's making me feel, you know, I'm, I wouldn't say it's like a, I wouldn't say it's like a road to like redemption from like my past actions or something, but yeah, it's, or maybe it is. Maybe it's driven by like my past guilt. I don't know.
And how old were you when you went vegan?
28.
28. Okay. Okay. I find that I find that, and this could be part of the guilt thing. I find that people who go vegan later in life, now 28 's still young, but people who go vegan like later in life, they usually do activism and start getting involved sooner. So like I know Chip
Yeah.
from Vegan Power Lab, he went vegan pretty late in life, so he started doing activism pretty soon after he went vegan. He was vegetarian a long time. So I find that, I don't know if that's like,
Yeah,
you know.
maybe because yeah, I was sort of thinking around the time that I did go vegan, I was sort of thinking about, what do I want to get out of life? Like what kind of legacy or what kind of world do I want to leave behind? And I had my niece had been born shortly before, so I was thinking more along the lines of that. Whereas I
Hmm.
suppose before then, I didn't really like consider anything like that, you know.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense.
So
I mean, I
maybe.
I went vegan like a few months after I turned 18. So
Mm.
for me, I wish I started doing this sooner. In fact, the spot that I'm in now is not the best place for activism. I kind of wish I did it more in my hometown or in like different places I live. But yeah, I went vegan at 18. So by the time I figured everything out, by the time I really like felt confident, I was already a few years vegan. Then I'm figuring out college, I'm figuring out careers, relationships, stuff like that. So I didn't really like have a drive to do activism, even though I probably should have. But then once I kind of, again, I started doing activism at like 24. Yeah,
Mm.
24, 25. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of that thing where it's like, okay, how do I want to contribute? Like, what do I want to do? What kind of person do I want to be? And like
Mm.
being vegan for 7 years is great, but I did want to actually have like a bigger impact, for the animals, or at least do whatever I can, even if it's a little bit, once a week, twice a week, make content. Um,
Yeah, I think if you've like sort of not done activism for years have gone by, I think that it'd be quite easy to be like, I'll just push it off, push it off, push it off. But so it's good that you did, and I think 24 is still quite a nice age to get into it.
yeah, no, I can't really complain. I'm actually, um, yeah, but I honestly like it doesn't really, at the end of the day, like we always say go vegan now, go vegan now, like we want people to go vegan as soon as possible, but at the end of the day it really doesn't matter what age. Like it does matter what age, but like as long as you make the connection. Obviously it's better to make the connection at 18 versus 60, but
Mm.
people are exposed differently. I think the more outreach and the more activism online there is, the quicker people will be making the connection and going vegan. We won't have people going
Mm.
vegan at 60 anymore. They'll be going vegan at 40 or 30 or whatever, whatever average age, which is cool. I think that's very cool.
Sure.
So, in terms of activism, let's start there. So, how often do you go out? Like, are you primarily doing cubes, like with Anonymous for the Voiceless, or are you, like, yeah, how often do you do it? What's your primary thing that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it started off doing cubes. So I still do those quite regularly, but also I do like all forms of activism really. I've done some like direct action, I've done some disruptions, I've done some sort of like social experiment type things, or like, the reverse psychology. I want to, I'm like at a stage at the moment where, I mean, it's predominantly been um, outreach, especially like the stuff that I've been uploading. Um, but I'm at a stage at the moment where I'm, yeah, I'm still sort of like playing around with, what's working, what's not working. I think because I've been uploading constantly for about 8 months, I think I said.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's still early days, really. I'm just still figuring, what's working, what's going to help me reach people, and what kind of direction do I want to take it, really. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. I'm just kind of getting out there, probably doing a cube, like, to be honest, not as often as I'd like, maybe like a couple of times a month.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of it is now I'm uploading is obviously editing and doing that side of things. But I think that that's still more valuable than being out on the streets all the time and not being filmed, because it's helping me get the reach.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Does
For
that,
sure. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
no,
What
no.
about
That you so you go out a couple times a month. Obviously, like we all want to do more. So I really started doing activism on the channel, or like uploading things on the channel, about a year ago. I want to say May of last year. So, a little over a year. Um,
Mhm.
and at first, I was going out like 4 days a week for hours. And
Mm.
you're getting content, and like you're filming, and you want to talk to as many people as you can. But I mean, after a year, like, I think it just, the amount of, and I want to get into that as well, but just the amount of, like, BS that you end up dealing with, like, and plus, you know, I think as activists, or as, like, vegans on the internet, I guess you could call it, it's hard to, like, it's good to remember that we have a life outside of this, like, it's like these are our morals, and that we want to, like, make, like, have a lasting impact, or make people go vegan or change or whatever. But I think it's really important to remember, like, we have goals and a life outside of just doing vegan activism or just doing things. And I think when you first get into it, at least for me, this like became my kind of life. Like, I get very tunnel vision when I have a goal, and you push and you push and you push, and then eventually it's like, okay, wait a second, maybe I have to only upload twice a week. Maybe I have to upload, only go out once or twice a week. You kind of find that balance. Um,
Mm.
so that's been.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, you can make, I mean, I've found like a way that, like, I can stretch my activism quite far, like kind of try and make the best of it. So, yeah, like doing one day of outreach, I might get like several shorts from it and be able to post it over, like, several days and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's good to have a balance, but I really I really hate having footage that's like just kind of sat there and on my laptop, and um it's not been like touched or uploaded or anything, because I'm just like, it's such a waste having it there. So as soon as I've got stuff, I'm just like constantly like you know making it in turning it into a video, uploading it and getting it
Mm-hmm.
out there. And then yeah, sometimes like weeks have passed and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to get more content.
Yeah, and I guess I want to start by talking about what you think works best from your
Mm-hmm.
experience. Now, there's two categories, right? There's what works best with people in, like, real life, the people you're talking to in the moment, and then what works best online, right? Because those are kind of very different. So from your experience, what do you think gets the most reception, or like what do you think gets people to make the connection more in real life, like when you're doing your outreach?
Yeah. I would say, you mean like what form of activism?
No, no, like because the form of activism you're doing, right? You're essentially educating and having conversations with people. Is there a certain dialogue you go down, or is there a certain argument you use that you feel gets the most like people it clicks the most for people? You know what I mean? Or
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, I started with AV, and I think I've kind of like, I like the way that it holds people accountable, and also really kind of like focuses. I'm talking about the AV kind of like structure. It's not like a strict. I'm not sure if you're like familiar with the structure that, do you do cubes with AV?
me? No, no. I've only done solo stuff. I would like to do group
Ah,
stuff. I'm just I'm very, what's the word? My fiance calls me not I'm uncollaborative. So I can be very yeah,
okay.
I don't really work that well with others because I have like a certain way that I want to do things. But I would be I think with other vegans I could probably work well. So I would like to do a cube, but go on.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, I think it's quite a good structure that's kind of like been perfected, where you essentially, it kind of like encompasses a lot of the Socratic method. So obviously asking a lot of open questions, and sort of finding out what their actual stance is or their belief system is, so that you can kind of like meet them with that. But also it like very heavily holds them accountable as well. And it's speaking to people in a way that's, you know, not not rude, or um not you're not being like disrespectful. You're just being very like firm and honest, and just like, there's no like bull crap around it. You're just like saying it how it is, speaking to people in the same way that you would like to be spoken out for if you were in the victim's position, or the same way that you would, but you're not being like apologetic. I think there's like a balance where you can still be, and I think it's very respectful to be honest with people, and just like, not like, pander, or not care so much about what they think about you or how you're coming across, but care more about delivering the message and speaking out for the animals. um so yeah, I really like that aspect of AV, and I think that's stuff that, even when I'm not at a cube, that's like stuff that I'm gonna sort of take away with me, or that I've implemented as well in like my own life, talking to people. um so yeah, I think that that's very effective. Um,
Do you find that the images, because I know if I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with the cubes they have the TV screens, right? Do you
hmm.
find that the actual footage of what happens to animals in various industries, do you find that that works really well, or like do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I was gonna say like with the image there, you can kind of you don't actually have to even be confrontational. You can kind of just ask, how does this make you feel?
Hmm.
Like do you contribute to this? Like different stuff like that. So yeah, do you? I would guess that that works pretty well.
Yeah, it kind of like, it not like takes the pressure off, but it really like adds value to what you're already doing and what you're saying, because I think when people are literally confronted, it's literally right in front of them.
Yeah, it's like
They
proof.
can't, yeah,
Like
they
you're
can't
literally
like,
showing them like seeing is believing,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they can't like shut it off. And I think that they're probably more honest, because it's very easy to say like, oh yeah, no, I don't care about like pigs or cows or whatever. It's not, I don't see it, and it's not something that I'm concerned about. But when there's a TV in front of you, and you can literally like stare in the eyes of those animals, it's very hard for somebody to say that, because they can literally see it right there. It's like, it's yeah, like you said, it's proof, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. No, I want to implement because I do it solo, right? And I want to
Mm-hmm.
implement more like,
Footage.
yeah, more footage. Not necessarily in the cube style, but like, hey, like if somebody's like not really like if they seem very distant to animals or to what they're contributing to, like, hey, can
Mm-hmm.
I show you what you're actually contributing to? Like, can I show
Yeah.
you what's happening because you pay for it? I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
would work really well. Um,
Yeah.
See, for me, I find that I struggle with what works well for me and
Mm-hmm.
what is going to work well for everyone else, right? Because what worked well for me was debates, right? Like hearing when I 7 years ago, hearing Vegan Gains debate, hearing Gary Yourofsky do his speeches, like that works. I didn't have to see anything that happens to animals. Like I didn't actually have to see the image. Just understanding that my values don't align with what's happening to the animals. That's all I needed, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
me, especially like now, I'm understanding this, so I tailor my methods differently depending on who I'm talking to. But when I first
Yeah.
went out, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to debate everyone. I'm going to win the debate, and they're going to go vegan on the spot. Like, oh, it's going to be perfect, right? And what
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding is, regardless of whether or not people like have a justification, are hypocrites or not hypocrites, like regardless of their position, they just don't care. Like they're like, unless you can get them to care about being like a better person and about what's happening to the animals,
Mm.
I think the reason why that method works well on me is because I cared. Like even though I wasn't vegan, I cared about being like the best person I possibly could, right? Because I
Yeah.
want to be better, right? If somebody can
Mm-hmm.
show me or like persuade me that what I'm doing is causing harm or violating the rights of somebody, I'm just going to stop. I'm not going to be like, but what about, no, I'm just going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I find that footage, it definitely helps. For me, I find what's been working really well is the dog thing
Right.
lately, because I find that for whatever reason, um, not for whatever reason, I guess when you're distanced, when you feel distance from an individual, you just completely lack empathy, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're benefiting from that individual, right? So
Mm-hmm.
all they're seeing none of, or they're like not understanding or not seeing any of the harm they're causing. They're
Mm-hmm.
getting the Big Macs and the burgers and the bacon and whatever, and all is well, right? They don't really
Yeah.
care. But I find recently, like, when I ask people, especially to avoid, like, oh, but animals don't feel pain, or like, oh, animals, like, people think animals are like automatrons, they're like robots or something. I find that, like, asking them, oh, do you have a dog? And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Do you agree that your dog is an individual? Like, they have a personality, they have likes, dislikes. They're like, oh, yeah, of course, he's a member of the family. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, all the other animals have that, right? So like, I find that that's been working really well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, if somebody's never had a dog, it doesn't work. But most people in my area, most people have encountered or have some kind of connection to an animal, like a companion animal. So, yeah, I find that works well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that can be a very good way to do it. Do you find that because I've done the dog, dog meat thing, or like sign this petition to legalize dog meat and stuff, and it usually like actually surprises me the amount of people who
Who are
like
like
want to
fine with
try
eating
it.
dogs?
Yeah, or
Yeah,
like sign it, and then you're like, oh, okay.
I don't find the dog thing works well if you're going to be like, oh, well, would you eat a dog? Because a lot of people, right, whether they're lying or not, they'll be like, yeah, I'd eat a dog. Oh, if it's
Hmm.
in there, I'll eat it. But I find it works well to avoid this whole conversation about sentience, like
Yeah.
to avoid the whole like dodging of like the fact that animals are sentient, similar to humans. Because
Hmm.
almost everybody that's had a dog will like immediately go, yes, that is an individual. They're practically a person, just maybe a little dumber and can't speak English. You know what I mean? Like almost
Yeah.
everybody will sign off on that. And if they can sign off on that, then they're gonna pay for pigs and cows and chickens to have their throats slit. You know, like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying because
Hmm.
obviously most people have been around a dog, so they can verify that dogs have emotions and they are capable of many experiencing many things. And I think, yeah, if you because you're right in the fact that they don't see the cows or the pigs or the chickens that they're eating, so it is good to kind of have that footage and so that they can actually like make a connection or like lessen the distance between them
Hmm.
and the animals. That's a
Yeah.
big problem.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to start doing that. I also found, I don't know if are you familiar with, I'm sure you are, but are you familiar with Name the Trait? The Name the Trait?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I find that, so what I've been trying to do prior to I did something different 4th of July, which I kind of want to keep doing. But prior to that, I tried to do like a reverse Name the Trait where I get them to sign off on their values of, I'm against murder, I'm against exploitation, I'm against abuse, I'm against discrimination, right? They sign off on all
Mhm.
of that. And then I ask them, okay, so why the double standard? Like, why the exception in this case, you know? And
Mhm.
it worked better. I think the problem is it really depends on your audience. Like, and that's also tough because the people I'm talking to, I'm like, I'm in Massachusetts. I don't know if you're familiar with the US. I'm in Massachusetts, and like we have some of the highest educated, like the most prestigious colleges. It's a very educated state, but where I am, it's not. So like, we're no offense to anybody living in Plymouth. Where I am, it's very like hunter, like it's very like hunting culture,
Mm.
farmland, conservative. Which again, not you could be smart and conservative. I'm just saying that um, like these are people who have never thought about this, who kind of do just follow the traditions. Haven't really
Mhm.
thought about morality. So when I'm trying to like have an intelligent conversation about their impact on other people, even if I lay it out as clear as possible, they still find a way to dodge. They still find a way to avoid the conversation. And yeah, that's been tough. So what I did instead on 4th of July is I asked them, "Oh, we're in America. Do you believe in freedom?" And like
Mhm.
that, for some reason, like I think the freedom thing for the area I'm in, they're like, "Yeah, I believe in freedom." I'm like, "Okay, do you believe in freedom for all?" They're like, "Yes, I do." I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay," and that like seems to work. So I don't know. Yeah, I find that like, do you change up um, your
Yeah.
dialogue, like how you start things, or yeah, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think doing a cube, it's kind of like very evident, like straight away, like what the message is. But the way that you explained just then, and I have done before actually, and I want to do like a lot more of this, is kind of talking about veganism or getting them to admit their like vegan traits without mentioning the word vegan. So um, that's something that I did back. I think it was like back in December last year or something. I went out on the streets and I was asking, what was I saying? What kind of values do you think that we should live by as human beings? And the answers that I was getting, well, I think we should respect each other, and we should um, treat each other how we want to be treated. And I was saying, okay, well, um, does that include everybody, like regardless of their like skin color, regardless of their ethnicity, their gender, all of these, the age, and oh yeah, 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 and okay, what about species? And then they're kind of like, oh, now you mentioned like the animals, and you can kind of go into the name the trait kind of thing. Well, if that applies to human beings, then why wouldn't you extend that to other species? What is the morally relevant difference? So I think that was a good way of doing things. And I think I did have like productive conversations doing it that way, because you kind of like make people admit their stance on it without, I think when you're at a cube, it's very easy for people to, because they know where it's going, they know what the dialogue is,
Mm-hmm.
they can kind of like choose the direction that it goes in. Whereas if they're being they're being honest, because they don't know like your like motive. It sounds like
Mm-hmm.
sinister, like we've got a motive, but if they don't know it, then they can't be like
Defensive
they
right
can't like,
away.
yeah, or like
Mm-hmm.
dodge, or you know. So I
Yeah,
think
like
that's a good way.
that's the thing. Like I've seen activists have a lot of success with like, I'm doing a social experiment, come talk to me or something. Whereas my sign
Mm-hmm.
just says you should be vegan. And what that does is like I put vegan on the sign because even if people don't stop and talk, I want them to see the word vegan. So that way, even if they Google it, like who knows, you never know. But what that does do is a lot of people who come up to me, they immediately like want to argue against veganism, right? They
Yeah,
usually have arguments that they already thought of in their head or whatever. Um, so that's kind of the downside. So I like kind of the hidden approach where you kind of start them off, because then their values, they are like honest, right? Their value, like you said,
yeah,
they'll
yeah,
be
yeah.
like, yeah, of course, everyone should be respected, everyone should live free, absolutely. But then
Yeah.
even though they like start off honest, the second you ask them about animals, they're like, well, not animals. Wait a second. No, 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 no. I'm not vegan. No, not this. Um,
Yeah.
so that's interesting.
I think yeah, yeah, there's benefits to, I think there's benefits to both really, and I think that, we should vary it up, and do different things, because different things are going to work for different people.
Mhm.
But yeah, like having a sign that says vegan, that's going to have benefits in different other ways, and probably maybe like make better content. I don't know, because people are going to come up to you like all angry and stuff. So
That's one thing I will say, and I guess we could transition into that. I find that while the confrontational and stubborn person who comes up and wants to argue against veganism,
hmm
that's not going to get them. I'm not going to get them to go vegan, right? But it does make for very interesting content. So like it's
hmm
almost like the I don't want to say the dumber. That's kind of rude, but like the more ignorant and the more angry person that tries to talk to me, the better the content. And
yeah.
that's really frustrating because I don't like that. I can't watch that stuff anymore. Like for me, I
Mhm.
want to watch two vegans debate, right? For me, like now I'm at a point where it's like, okay, give me something. Like give me something that makes me think a little bit.
hmm
But for people who aren't vegan, or for people who maybe are just getting into veganism, or just maybe transitioning, if you want to call it that, I find that is still very interesting, and that seems to do well, especially in like shorts. Um,
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you prefer, like, do you think that shorts do better, or do you prefer like long form content, or
Yeah, I mean, probably shorts do a lot better in terms of they get more views, and you can, yeah, you can like make them in a way that, they hit home a point that you really want to make. So, taking a section out of the long video, and you can put a message on there, and you're hitting home a point. Whereas long form videos, um I still think there's value in them, because a lot of people still watch them. It's mostly like vegans who watch. I don't know if this is the same for you. Vegans
mm-hmm.
watch the long form videos, and then the non-vegans watch the short form videos. So I think they're both like valuable in the fact that, obviously, I want support from other vegans. It's great to have people, backing me up on my channel, and encouraging me to keep making content and stuff. And it's good to kind of try and reach non-vegan audiences as well. So so yeah, but I say all in all, especially, there's so little um effort as well, short videos. Like you can whip one up in like 30 minutes maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
what
like
I've
the
been
long
doing,
ones.
like I have like probably 20 videos that I still have to cut up into reels. So like I post the long form, I'm like caught up to date with all I don't have any long videos left, except I actually have one, but other than that, but all of the videos I've posted, I can still cut up into reels. So like
Yeah.
I have short content for like probably the next like 6 months, like the way that I post. So that's good. Like, and they do, I agree with you. Like, especially on Instagram, I find that non-vegans just like grab a hold of it and it just goes crazy. Like the comments, and I get a lot of views on the like the reels. The long form content I do find is mostly vegans watching, which for everybody watching right now, thank you for watching and supporting, of course. And that's interesting because I'm trying to remember what I thought when I first went vegan. Like, how did I go, like, because it seems like, I don't know if you've had this experience, maybe I'm not that good of an activist, I don't know, but it seems like nobody's going vegan. Like, genuinely, like it feels like but like there's very few encounters where people have like said, hey, yeah, I'm vegan now, or it feels like nobody's going vegan, right? So it almost feels like sometimes I am making content for other vegans, but
Yeah.
you never know the impact. But yeah, that's interesting. But I
Yeah.
love. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I hear what you're saying, because like, especially the people who are commenting, it's either vegans showing their support or it's trolls, and there's like no in between. You don't get people, or very rarely anyway. But there's a lot of, I think that even still, like, there's probably a lot of people who are silently watching, and it's going in, or even trolls. It's gonna
So
have
that's
a
what I'm hoping, because when I went vegan, I didn't comment. I didn't like say anything. I didn't do anything. I do find that like the commenters are like really diehard vegan supporters or vegan activist supporters, or like you said, like trolls. And it is, and usually the trolls outnumber the supporters, unfortunately. But I've got to hope, like I've got to like hang on to that hope that like, okay, there are people watching this that are thinking. They're not commenting. They're not like, they're thinking, and they're wrestling with their mind, and they're going to make the switch. You know what I mean? You just got to hope,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's better to, I always say, like, even if sometimes people say to me, oh, the world will never go vegan. And I'm like, well, even if that was the case, it's not going to stop me from trying my damn hardest. Like, I'm still going to go out there and do what advocate for what I think is right.
I find that very, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I find that argument very funny. Like, I do get that a lot from people on the street. They're like, well, it's an uphill battle. Or like, well, you're never going to. It's like, okay, well, you could say that about anything. Like, how do you think people do anything? Like, whether it's athletics or social change or anything. Like, yeah, of course it's an uphill battle, but,
Yeah, it's almost like they think we're going to go, like, oh, you're right. You know what? I'll give up.
Right. Like what? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's like, well, here I am doing this. Like, I know it's not easy, but I'm choosing to do it because I care.
Right. Like, I feel like one day they're gonna say it. I'm gonna go, that's what I needed to hear, man. You're right. I'm going home. Like, I'm never doing this again. Like, I don't know. That's funny. All right. I just want to catch up on the chat a little bit, and then I want to go into the negatives of doing outreach, which honestly I need to vent a little bit, so that's also partly why I'm doing this.
Therapy.
Okay, so Gigliardo did say, Mr. Logical, I want to run my fingers through your curly locks. Thank you. You could do that anytime. I've been growing it out, so I'm gonna keep it probably. Let's see, Biden dropped out. Not related to this at all, but I didn't know that, so thank you guys for keeping me up to date on the news. Somebody asked a question. Hold on. Oh, Beth Jarvis asks, what do you guys think of ex-vegans? Do you mind if I start this?
Go ahead.
So, in terms of ex-vegans, like, I know they say, like, they weren't really vegan, they were plant-based. And like, I guess with their actions, yeah. I mean, it's hard to like be against the exploitation of animals and then not be against the like all of a sudden just not be against it. I think what happens is most people who do like try veganism, they are trying it like a diet, or they're trying it like it's like a social club or like a community. You know, like they get hooked on that. So yeah, I think if you were to actually have a conversation with them when they were vegan, they would probably not have very good answers to like their position on things, right? On the moral position. They'd probably be very wishy-washy, or just say something like, "Oh, I love animals," or something, something pretty vague, not that thought out, but it's mostly about the foods they're eating and stuff. So yeah, I would say they're probably just trying it out as a diet, and if they had a firmer grasp on animal rights or on the reasons why it's the morally correct position to be against animal exploitation, they probably would have tried to make it work before just going back to eating beef or whatever they eat.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. I'd say that so what you're saying, it sort of stems from a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what veganism actually is. So somebody will say that they're vegan or identify as vegan when they haven't actually adopted the vegan philosophy, and they're just like, trying to diet, and they think that that's what veganism is. I would also say, in addition to that, I would say that these kind of people, they're just like, I don't want to say weak, because that sounds like not necessarily weak. Maybe that's like not a good word to use, but like easily influenced. Because I think, going back to what you said about, you were interested in debating before, and you cared about being the best person that you possibly could be. I think that that's probably like quite a rare trait. Like most people, they just want to fit in with society, or this is my kind of like understanding about people. They just want to fit in, be the same as everybody else. They don't want to be like the outlier or like ostracized or something. So I think that, I always worry as well, like, when I'm outreaching and stuff, that it's very easy to influence people, and you might think that, or assume that that's a good thing, because we can get through to them and influence them. But then once they've gone away from us and they've got all of the the media and their family members and their friends, and they're constantly surrounded by living in a carnist world and a carnist society, they're going to be influenced to you know to like go back on what they've said, and believe other things. If somebody says an argument, oh yeah, but what about this, then they're gonna, if several of the people have said that, they're gonna like agree with them, because they want to like fit in, and they just go with what everybody else is saying.
And I find that so interesting because I've never understood this whole thing of like people wanting to just do what everyone else is doing. Because if you, any type of like, if people have gone to school, which I'm sure they have, any type of history lesson, any type of like figure that we look at in the past, they all did things differently, right? We've never looked at somebody that just did what everyone else was doing at the time and be like, hey, this person's important, like, so even from like a selfish perspective, forget about like animals or trying to be a better person. Even if you're like the worst person on the planet, like a really shitty person, I find it very strange that you wouldn't want to do things differently, if anything, just for your own like selfish, like the goal to be different or the goal to be like recognized or something, So like, even from that perspective, I'm like shocked by the amount of people that are like, nope, I'm good. I'm just going to keep my head down, like that's strange to me. And then of course, if you want to be a better person, like there's always things that need improvement, right? Like nothing's perfect, hence why we inch and inch and inch closer to, making things better. So even, you know, whether you're coming at it from like a selfish perspective or a perspective where you want to see the world better, be better, you should be doing things differently. So that's very strange to me. I don't get it. Like I get it, but I just don't get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think people, like, we admire people who have, you know, who have stepped up and said, you know, this is wrong, and we think, oh yeah, you know, they're really brave and stuff. But from a survival perspective, wanting to fit in with the masses, I think that, you know, it's out of our comfort zones to like step out and do that. And I think that, you know, people will always like admire those in history who have like stood up for what's right, but
But
I
not
don't
me.
know.
Yeah, not me. No, I'm not the guy.
Yeah, but then I don't know. I think that the what you said about, you know, wanting to be like a hero or something, that can, it can like attract like ego driven people into the movement, but they're not necessarily doing it for the right reasons. Then they'd be doing it because, you know, they want to be a hero or they want to have a hero complex, which is something I get accused of a lot. I don't know about yourself.
Yeah, well, and that could be part of the ex-vegan thing, right? So like
Yeah,
they could also be attracting people like that, you know. So that's a good point, yeah.
yeah, but yeah, obviously that wouldn't make them necessarily vegan. It would just make them like a virtue signaler or something, you
Yeah,
know.
kind of a douche.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think humans are just complicated
Very
creatures.
interesting. Yeah, very interesting creatures for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so okay, what do you think works? What do you think does not work? So like in terms of your experience doing vegan activism, what do you find that just like either it's like throwing, you know, whatever at a brick wall, or like what do you think doesn't work?
I would say just like talking at people, or like, you know, there's, well, you've got to, because obviously you can try and educate people, but if they're not being asked questions, because obviously with the whole Socratic method, that there's a saying which is like, you believe what you say, not what you hear.
Hmm.
So if you're getting people to, you know, admit what they already believe, I think that's going to be a lot easier. Whereas if you're saying, you know, I think this is wrong, or I think this, or, you know, you're just talking at them, I
Yeah, like
think that,
lecturing.
yeah, that they could very easily like shut off. Um, yeah, I think lecturing, or I don't know, maybe like bribing with like vegan food, like come and try this. I think it's good to like, it's good to give people, you know, like experience of how nice vegan food actually is. But if they don't understand why they should eat it in the first place, then that's not going to necessarily advocate for veganism. Um, yeah, I think, or I mean, you could even go the other way and say like, you know, kind of shaming people, or I think we've got to meet people, not be too like apologetic. I think there's like a balance. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, first off, I definitely agree. I think lecturing, I found that out very quickly. You can lose people, and again, I
Hmm.
think it's not because the information isn't good. I think it's because of the way people work and the way people respond to things. For me, lecturing works great. Like I listened to Gary Yourofsky's speech. It's just a lecture, and I went, "Oh my God, I've got to be vegan," right? But especially like in person, people tend to really latch on to, I don't know if it's identity or maybe just their way of life. Like they really latch on to it, even if they've never thought about it, which is so funny. Like the people who come up to me, they have never thought about this for more than 5 seconds in their life. And all of a sudden they're experts. Like in this one category, like I was telling like my fiance Julia, it was like, imagine if I had a sign related to chemistry, right? And I said, hey, something chemistry, come talk to me. Do you think people would come up and try and tell you things about chemistry? No, of course not, because they know they don't know shit about chemistry, right? But the
Yeah.
second that it has to do with like their way of life or like bacon, you know, or whatever, they're immediately experts. And I find that interesting. I think it's something like when it's having to do with them changing their way of life, they do not respond well to like educational information,
Yeah.
unless they find it on their own, which is interesting, right? It's kind of like have you ever maybe this is a kind of a me thing, but I've heard this too. Have you ever been given a music recommendation and like have
Yeah. Yeah.
and like put it off, or like when you listen to it you're like, this isn't that good, whatever, but
Yeah.
then a band, or like maybe a few months later you'll come back to that on your own and you'll be like, wait a second, this is actually pretty good, right? It's like sometimes you, in order to like gravitate towards something or change something, I feel like it has to feel like your decision, you know.
Yeah.
And like when you're lecturing or when you're listening to somebody tell you information, it feels like it's not your own decision, maybe.
Yeah. People don't like being told what to do. Do they?
Right, even if it makes perfect sense, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's maybe an ego thing.
Yeah. But like, if you think about it, they're being told what to do, not like directly, but like they're being influenced every day,
Oh
like in so
yeah,
many ways.
that's the
And they're
irony of
like,
it. It's like they got to this
yeah,
position, they're doing what they're doing because they were told to do that. Yeah, that's
exactly. And they're saying, "Oh, I'm not going to adopt this ideology," and it's like, well, you've already adopted some ideology that you're like acting out now. Like, it doesn't make sense.
yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, that's so funny. Like people will be so like, yeah, no, that's really interesting. And then you said, sorry, we talked about lecturing, and then what was the second thing you said?
Um, Giving out food samples, which I think
Oh,
can be done effectively, if they understand the reason why they should make those choices, not just obviously with food, but like, you have to bring it back to the animals and extend it to other areas of their life as well.
yeah, I find the food thing like I think it's good depending on the maybe if they ask you questions to paint vegan food or like the vegan like a lifestyle in like a positive way. You know,
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I buy this detergent, or oh yeah, I eat, there's so many vegan restaurants right here, you know, like to kind of paint that in a positive way. But
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, like we're all adults. Like just be an adult, just figure it out. You know, like Sky. I was watching Sky. I'm sure you're familiar with Sky. His vegan after dark show. I never really watched it, but I
Hmm.
started watching it because I think he reacted to one of my things. I was laughing. I was on the floor laughing. I could not contain my laughter. So if anybody hasn't watched Vegan After Dark from Vegan, of course, Sky, his segment, it's hilarious. But he literally the other day he was like, just be an adult. He's like, just figure it out. He's like, I'm not here to tell you about nutrition and educate you on, to just figure it out. You're an adult, you know. And
Hmm.
I think it's so funny how quickly people will become, I don't want to say become victims like in their own mind, but how quickly people will turn into like babies. You know,
Yeah.
like the second that they're kind of inconvenienced, they're like, oh well, I don't know what to do. It's like, I don't, figure it out. There's apps for everything. Download a food app.
Yeah.
You know, look up vegan rent. Like,
I
you know.
mean, to me, yeah, if somebody's asking how they should go vegan, or if they're asking like, if they're asking you questions about health or nutrition or things like that, it's almost like they aren't um they're not like connected enough to why they should do that, because if they we always say at AB, it's not about the how, it's about the why, because you need to have that motivation. Like, that's the most important thing. You need to want to go vegan. So if you have that, that you're gonna find a way. You don't need to stand there and ask questions or whatever, because you've got a phone, you've got the internet. You're gonna find a way. So yeah, I think that's probably, yeah, they're not like convinced enough.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I'm going to start saying, like, everyone who asks, like, well, what about nutrition? I'm going to say, the fact that you're asking me that tells me you don't know anything about nutrition. So,
Mm,
like the fact that people even ask tells me that they don't track their food, are
mm-hmm.
probably deficient in a few vitamins, eat probably fast food, right? Just eat the general basic diet. So, like, that is, it's just so, like, I swear to you, people coming out of bars drunk, like I'm talking drunk, smoking, vaping, whatever, and they will look me in the eye and say, what about the vitamins in meat? Like, I swear to you. And it's like, dude, it's like I sure I could explain it to you, but do you really care about that, or are you just trying to avoid the hard conversation of, hey, you're causing, suffering and you're violating the rights of animals? Like, are
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
trying to avoid that conversation? Because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, I've had that. Like people who are like, similar kind of size to me. I'm not like massive, and they're like, "What? Well, what about if you're a bodybuilder?" And I'm like, "Are you a bodybuilder?" And they're like, "No." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Why does that concern you then?"
Like, people that I'm like 3 times their size will be like, well, what about building muscle? I'm like, what do you
Yeah,
mean? Are you trying to build muscle? Because you're not doing a good job now, so you might as well go
yeah.
vegan. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously we could spend like, we could entertain these questions probably for hours and hours on end. But then, at the end of the day, where are you getting with that? Because you probably like it's distracting from the animal rights message. And that's like the important bit that you want to kind of spend as much as your time focusing on as possible. So I think I'm not saying that those kind of questions about health and stuff can't be addressed. I think that, if it's like a quick answer, but then like bring it back to the animals. And I don't know about you, but I find that with like the health questions, some of them they're like completely irrelevant anyway, because
Hmm.
it's like, somebody will say, well, I'm a lot healthier eating animals. You could spend like half an hour debating whether or not it's you could be healthier eating um, an animal-based diet or whether you could be healthier eating a plant-based diet. But then at the end of the day, if it was like humans in the animal's position and we could be healthier eating humans, it still wouldn't matter. So it's like that's completely pointless anyway.
Yeah, and I do find, like, that's something I had to learn at the beginning. It's like, okay, like, because again, I assume when people ask a question, they genuinely want to
Mm,
know, or they genuinely want to, like, have a intelligent conversation. But a lot of times these questions are just derails, right? They're
mm,
trying to derail you and to find excuses to not do the thing or whatever, right? To postpone it. So nowadays, if it depends on the person. If somebody's if somebody's actually receptive and they ask, well, what kind of stuff can I eat? Or, that's different. But if
mm-hmm.
you're in the middle of a point, or if you're like trying to ask questions and they specifically bring up, well, what about this? What about that? You can kind of tell, and you kind of be like, look, I have sources. We could talk about nutrition all day, but let's focus on, the animal, the topic at hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that super important. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I noticed, because I went through some of your content recently. You deal with a lot of. Is there like a big Muslim population in your area?
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna ask, who do you think are the hardest to get through? Because for me, Christians are. It's any type of religious group is pretty hard because they just fall
Mm-hmm.
back on the religion, and it's kind of it's one of those things where, like, I can't be like, well, you're stupid. I guess I could, but, like, they believe what they believe, and me calling them stupid, or me saying, hey, actually, you shouldn't go off of things that aren't proven to exist, is just gonna push them further away, right? So it's hard
Yeah.
to know. So that the Christian thing is hard. I
Mm-hmm.
do think I found some good points to bring up. In my most recent, I had a video about debating a couple Christians. I thought some of those points were good, but overall, I find religious people are the hardest. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably agree with you because it's like you can't tell somebody that their religion is a load of crap. Like that's because that's to them that's their identity. That's what they've like encompassed their whole life. But I think that I'm I'm gonna try and start doing this a lot better than I have done. So I haven't like adopted this approach as of yet, but I think that what I'm gonna try and do going forward is like make a distinction as to whether, in terms of like their religion itself, because obviously, you know, there's there's no issue in, you know, being religious or like worshiping a certain god or, you know, praying, but the issue is when their religion has a direct impact on somebody else
Hmm.
and their
When they
religion is
use their
harmful.
religion to justify
Yeah,
harm, or yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So I think what I'm going to start doing is trying to kind of put them in that situation and saying like, well, what if somebody used their religion? Because obviously everyone can accept that there's other religions. So if I said, you know, if what about if my religion says that, you know, it's okay to exploit or enslave people with curly hair, for example. So
No, no,
it's like
not the curly hair, please.
Um, so it's kind of like, you know, that's the same kind of um, that's the same kind of belief system that they have, but it's like kind of adopting that. You know, what if my religion says that this kind of certain gender or age group or ethnicity or this category of people are here for me, because they always say, you know, religious, well, the animals are here, they're put for us. Well, my God says that you were put here for
Hmm.
me, and obviously it's not okay because it infringes on somebody else's rights. So I think that I'm going to try and sort of, yeah, use that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I just want to call out vegan Beth says I. So in emojis, it's an eye, and then a heart, and then a thing of lettuce. So I think that's
Oh,
for you.
mhm.
Um,
Oh, thank you.
but yeah, I find that what's it called? So I'll use an actual example. I swear to God, this is what this guy said to me. Okay, so I'm talking to these people, and this guy said, you know, personally, you know, my God allows me to kill these animals, you know, and I'm like, oh, are you a Christian? I'm assuming, like, oh, we could talk about that. And he's like, no. He's like, I don't follow the Bible. I'm not Christian. It's just my own personal God. I'm like, okay. So you're saying just your own personal God that's in your head just gave you permission to kill these animals? I'm like, okay. The cloud God just told me that I could kick you in the nuts over and over again. Can I do that? Like that's what we're talking about. Like it's one like it's one thing if you're going off of like an established religion, which I still think again is not a good justification. But to say
Mhm.
that like he literally was like, nope, just my own personal God. It's like, okay, do you need to go to a doctor or something? Like that's not, you know, like what are we talking about? Um,
Yeah, that's crazy. You could literally justify anything by saying that.
yeah, I was like, yeah, well, my personal spaghetti monster in the sky told me to punch you in the face. Like, what are we talking about? Um,
Hmm.
and I guess because I want to vent a little bit, all right? Because I need
Hmm.
a, well, I guess I should ask, do you, how do you deal with frustration? Like, how do you deal with, because I find that lately, especially, um, it is just every time I go out, I am feeling more and more frustrated. How do you feel that? How do you deal with frustration if you do feel that? What's going on there?
Yeah, I do get frustrated. Um, I mean, a lot of people, they're like, "Oh my God, you're so patient," and I'm thinking like, "Am I?" Because I didn't feel patient in the moment. Like, you know, when people are saying these bullshit things, and sometimes it's like very difficult to like try and, you know, they're like talking over you and stuff, and you know, you're not having a good day. But yeah, I do get frustrated. I think that how do I deal with it? Um, yeah, I don't know. I think putting content out online kind of helps with that frustration because there's so many other people who understand. So it's
Mm,
kind of like you've got that like community you can relate to, and I mean, I don't know, maybe wouldn't still be doing this if there weren't people online saying like, yes, you know, more content or, you know, encouraging me to do so. Um, and yeah, I think having positive conversations as well, that like really helps. And you know, if you've had like 5 bad conversations in a row and then you have like one good one, it's almost like, okay, those 5 ones were worth it because I had that one good one. And you know, if I wasn't doing this, like, you have to remind yourself, you know, it's people like this. Sometimes I'll speak to, like, you know, someone who's like so lovely and really like receptive, and I'm like, you know, if I wasn't doing this, I wouldn't get to speak to people like that. And it's people like that that we're here for at the end of the day. But I don't know, the frustrating people makes the good content as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like the other night I didn't get any videos. The only people I dealt with were like essentially teenage trolls. But then at the end I'm waiting cuz we share a car, so my fiance's picking me up and I'm waiting and this guy comes out of 7-Eleven and he sees the sign and he's like give me a reason why I should be vegan. And I explain it to him and he's like what about nutrition? I'm like, you could eat. There's plenty of. You could be healthy vegan. I got sources, blah blah. And he's like, I've been vegan 18 years. He's like, just wanted to know what you were saying. He's like, I was. He's. I think said he was like 24. He was like adopted into like a vegan family or something, and he's been vegan for like 18 years. And I was like, are you serious? I was like, do not mess with me right now. He was like, yeah, I'm serious. He's like, awesome guy. He's like, I gave him a card. So like, even though he was already vegan, stuff like even those interactions really like that kind of took away all the stress or all of like the frustration I felt. That kind of just took it away, and that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't there, and like to what you were saying too, like for every troll that passes by that laughs or calls me a pussy or whatever the fuck they want to say, the one person that does come up and genuinely cares and wants to know and has interesting questions, that makes it worth it. Like that's kind of the point,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really just a numbers game, like the more you go out or the longer you do it, even if you can't go out that often, over time, it makes a difference. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask. So is your activism like standing with a sign?
Yep.
Is the most part you do?
That's it. Yeah.
I was gonna ask. Is it the same like kind of people that approach you, or do you tend to get like a mixed bag?
I tend to get a mixed bag, especially because like lately I've been doing with my work schedule. It's kind of tough because where I am, like I could do activism before work, but then the way my work is, I'm like pretty much sedentary for 10 hours, and I work from like 1:45 to 12:15 at night. So I've been doing a lot of skating. I've been doing a lot of exercise before work. I find that's helped a lot with like my mental health, my physical health. So the only times I really do activism are like Friday and Saturday nights because there's a lot of people, and where I do activism, there's a lot of bars. So it's a mixed bag. Sometimes I'll get party people who are like, oh, let's talk to the vegan, I'll get that guy. I'll get people who are like doing like actually into philosophy and debates. I'll get people who are super anti-vegan, pro-hunting, pro-farming. So it really is kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, for me, I just like to get somebody. Like that's the thing is like for me, if I go out and I spend an hour and a half of my time, 2 hours sometimes of my time, and don't get like nobody talks to me, that's like really what's it called, demoralizes me. Which I feel like the cube kind of I think the cube, because there's that image, because there's more people, it's more of like a presentation. I feel like the cube, you never really knock at anyone, right? Somebody's gonna come up and look and watch, and then you can approach them. So that's kind of the downside to doing like solo activism, where you kind of just want to have a conversation about things. Yeah, so that's hard.
It definitely like draws people in, and sometimes like the more people that stop, then the more people that stop, because they're like, oh, other people are interested in this.
Yeah, it
What is
becomes like
it?
a spectacle almost. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I was asking that because of what you said about like obviously there being a lot of Muslims in Birmingham, and I think sometimes people have been like, "Why are you picking on Muslims?" And I'm like, "I'm not picking on Muslims. It's
Hmm.
just like a lot of them are stopping because I don't know if you find this, but the aside from the trolls, the people who are actually like the people I tend to find are more interested in hearing the message are people who, you know, are maybe not maybe like different in some sort of sense, like you know, different kind of like nationality, or they're religious, or they're I don't know, they're already in some kind of like minority group or something. Maybe it's because they're more like open to hearing about other forms of oppression. I'm not too sure if that's something
Yeah,
you
yeah.
find.
Well, what's surprising? So that I think that's interesting. I do think maybe a lot of Muslims stop because their religion emphasizes like halal slaughter
Mm,
and like compassion animals. So
yeah,
for them, I think it might be like a thing of importance. Um, and maybe they're like, oh, this is awful. We don't do this, even though we all know
yeah,
halal
yeah, yeah.
slaughter. What's funny for me, right? So again, I'm in a pretty heavy like farm hunting town.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime there's somebody, and it's very few people of color, very few like LGBTQ plus
Mm.
community members, if you want to call them that. So whenever I do see people of color in town or people who may be gay, lesbian, whatever, they never stop. And
Really?
what's so interesting to me is like people who I know are probably pro equality in so many
Mm-hmm.
ways, right? Who would, you know, repost stuff on Instagram and who would like say I'm pro this, I'm pro that. They never stop. They never want to actually have the conversation, which is really upsetting because I know that if they did stop, they would probably understand what I'm saying or probably agree, they would probably be less defensive than.
Maybe that's why they're not stopping
Yeah, maybe
because they
that's a
know.
good point. They probably know that it's the right thing to do, and they don't want to change, so they don't even want to stop.
Mm.
Um, and that's really frustrating. Because for me, I'm thinking like, please stop, because you're part of a group that's been oppressed. Like you're part of a group that's been like
Mm.
on the other end of violence for no justifiable reason, and
Yeah,
you're doing that to another group. So like, you should be able to understand this more than anybody. Um,
yeah.
and that's frustrating. Um, but
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the halal thing, I was gonna ask your opinion about this because with like the whole religion thing, and this is like what I've done in the past is like, you know, tried to kind of meet people with where they're at and stuff. So like, because obviously Muslims are um they're like, you know, no, we don't do it like this. You know, they have halal slaughter, and the whole idea behind that is the fact that, you know, halal is they're against the suffering of animals.
Hmm.
Um, that's not necessarily like compatible with veganism, because obviously veganism is a stance against animal exploitation. But I, in the past, I've tend to like use that suffering to kind of like get in to like what's the word um to kind of like meet them with something that they understand. So I've kind of like used that and said, you know, if you're vegan, then you can be sure no animals are suffering because of you, blah blah blah.
Yeah, you try.
Um,
I've seen that with you and like Joey Carpenter,
yeah,
where
yeah,
you try and instill doubt. Like, okay, I know you're saying that all your meat is done properly and or all your animals are butchered properly and it's halal, but you can't
yeah,
be sure. And if you
hmm,
don't want to commit something that's against your religion, you should be vegan because that's like a
yeah,
surefire way of like ensuring that you're not going against your values. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So some, I know, like, I'm not saying that that is the vegan message,
Hmm.
but I know some vegans are a little bit like, they don't like us using the word suffering because they think it might be like watering the message down. But I
Dude,
think that,
like sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but there's been a lot of shit talking amongst vegans
Yeah.
and a lot of like I think I get it. Like I think the message has to be clear, but at the same time, if you're taking a snippet of a conversation out of context, that doesn't mean you automatically your values align with welfarism or your values align with
Yeah.
something not something other than the liberation of animals, right? So like a lot of people have been calling Joey Carbstrong a utilitarian or somebody who's like a welfarist, but his and sure maybe like you said, maybe if he's talking to a certain person, he may try an approach that'll get maybe he thinks it'll get through to them more, or he may talk about welfare. His whole documentary was kind of about a welfare issue with pigs, right? Pignorant. But his values, his whole goal is to see animal exploitation end. So
Sure.
I think to call you or call Joey or call anybody something that they clearly are not, or would tell you based on their values they are not, is I think is just some kind of weird gatekeeping or shit talking. Like, and I appreciate criticism. Like, hey, I see what you were doing there, but I do think maybe you could have done this better. Or hey, like I love when people give me feedback because it does help me. But there's a difference between giving me feedback and like just dismissing me as an activist or as a vegan altogether. I think that's silly.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because like obviously I think that it would be it's more difficult to kind of, especially with people who are religious, it's more difficult to like deliver the vegan message in the fact that, we're vegans, we're against animal exploitation and you should be too, because, their religion says that that's fine. They're like,
Right.
exploitation, that's like a big thumbs up.
Well, I was going to
But
say also most
yeah,
religions, they have this line separating humans and animals, right? So when
yeah, yeah,
when we're trying to say like, oh, we're animals, other animals are animals, we all are sentient, so we should be equals. They're like, no, 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 because God says humans are special. So it's kind of one of those things where you can't really like go down a like of course you could go down that path and try and discredit their religion, but at the end of the day they're indoctrinated, they believe what they believe, right? They believe
yeah,
humans are special.
and then you're getting into a religious debate then,
Right, right.
as opposed to like a vegan debate. So yeah, that's why I tend to like try and like meet them with their values that they already hold. And I think that, there's a lot of different aspects that you can use to kind of like bolster veganism. And the suffering aspect is one of them, but it's not necessarily saying, veganism is about suffering or whatever. But do you think that it does any like harm to the vegan message overall, talking about these like different aspects that's not like entirely what veganism is about? Or
It's hard to say if it does harm. I do think that arguing the religion aspect, like from a point of suffer, or kind of like feeding into that, I do think it's just not that effective. Personally, like if somebody's like, oh well, um, I purchase all my meat from humane farms, right? And somebody said, well, it's hard to know 100% that those animals are treated humanely, so you should be vegan just to make sure, right? While I mean that's a pretty decent argument. I mean, most likely they are purchasing animals that are slaughtered in ways that they disagree with. The point is that doesn't really do anything to counteract their mindset of, oh, it's not about how they're treated, or it's not about like whether they're treated well or not. It's about the fact that we are treating them as products, right? We're exploiting them. When it comes to like the halal thing, I think, because halal slaughter, when they say there's no suffering, we know what this looks like, right? It's from what I've seen, it's a butcher putting their knee on the animal's face, stretching them out, and then slicing their neck open, right? It's a really sharp knife, and sure, they bleed out like pretty quickly. But what I would ask is, okay, I would describe the slaughter, and then I would ask, is that something that you would want done to you, Like, is that something that you would want to happen to you? Would you want to die
Yeah.
that way? You know, like kind of really like send the message home like, hey, sure, maybe this is less suffering, or maybe this is an instantaneous death, but it is violent, and it is you're exploiting these animals, right? Or I'd probably use like, I don't know, like an example of something immoral, even though there's no suffering. Like, I don't know, like sexually assaulting a woman when she's passed out or something, you know? Because like, sure, she may never remember it. There may be no suffering involved per se, but based on the rights that we grant individuals, based on our values of like valuing bodily autonomy and freedom and individuality, whatever, that's wrong, right? We're against that. So regardless of whether they're suffering or not, what gives you the right to violate somebody's body, or I guess to slice their throat open when you clearly don't have to? We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So that's probably the approach I would take. Now, again, it's hard to know what's more effective. So yeah, I do think that a snippet just talking about the suffering can be a little confusing. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say like, you're a welfarist, or like, oh, you're ruining veganism. I don't think that's true, because it's hard to know what's going to get people down that path of like looking further into it, or what's it called? Like connecting the dots to being vegan. But yeah, it's just not an approach that I would take personally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it could be good to like encompass both, maybe, and kind of say like, you know, the suffering part is inevitable, like it's almost like guaranteed in the way that animals are being selectively bred, but then at the same time, you know, even if it was being done, I mean, in the best possible way, it's still a violation of their rights.
Yeah, you could say both. Yeah, I mean, you can instill
yeah.
doubt in their religion of like, hey, okay, sure, you value only, you know, killing animals in a certain way. There's no way to know that for sure. But even if there was, do you think that the way that halal slaughter is done, would you call that non-violent? Would you want that to happen to you? I think there's a way to encompass both, and I think that would be effective too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because yeah, it's the halal thing with Muslims, and then with Christians. I mean, I don't get many Christians where I outreach, but I know you do. And yeah, the one that came up recently was the fact that, you know, we have souls, other animals don't have souls, and we can do what we want with them or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Have you got any like good tips on how to deal with that kind of
I mean,
argument?
it's hard to like, it's so funny how people will like deny an individual's ability to like have a subjective experience, even though they have a brain and nervous system. But souls, foolproof. We definitely have them, you know, like I find that very funny. But for me, like I do, especially with like souls, I do try and discredit that. Like I will try and be like, okay, so you're using something that we don't know for a fact exists to justify exploiting another individual. Like I do try and discredit that, but at the same time, when people are like, well, we have dominion, I kind of do the same thing where I kind of play into this idea of like, okay, we have dominion over the planet, over the animal. Sure. What does that mean? Like, does that have to mean kill everything and everyone in sight? Or could that mean actually taking care of and protecting and nurturing, you know, like, and which would you rather see, right? The most recent debate I had with Christians, I did ask them, they were like, oh, only humans are made in the image of God. I said, okay, but didn't God make the animals? And they're like, yeah, of course. I'm like, okay, so let's say there's a sculpture, right? Like God is a sculptor and there's like a marble, right? And he's like doing the humans, right? Okay, so that's in his image. Whose image did he make the animals in? Right? If he made the animals, it had to be in his image, or what does that mean? And they were like, no, they're like, you don't get, they're like, when we say his image, we mean something like he was super vague, their response. And I'm like, okay, but he made the animals. So like he made the animals. He gave them brains. He gave them nervous systems. So I don't see how we're the only ones made in God's image, but they aren't. I don't get it.
Yeah, I've never understood that. It's kind of like nonsensical to me. Like, what does that even mean? Made in his image?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like a bunch of words like scrambled together. It's like it just makes no sense to me. Yeah,
I
I don't know.
find that what also has been working, this has been really good. I'll ask people, I'll be like, okay, I'm like, did you do anything to become a human? Like to be human? They're like, no. I'm like, yeah, so you won the lottery. I'm like, you just so happen to be born a human, the most dominant species on the planet with no predator. Like, you could have easily been born a cow or a pig or a chicken or any, like congratulations, you're a human. You could have
Mhm.
easily been one of these animals that you want to die just so you could have a burger. And that works better with non-religious people, but
Yeah.
still like this whole idea of like people think they're somehow entitled to exploit other sentient individuals just because they were human when they did nothing to be a human. It's not like it's some kind of rite of
Mm.
passage or something. Like they were literally just born and won the lottery of like being the most dominant species on the planet. Um,
Yeah, that's
I
the thing. Like with a soul, there's no like you can't put any. It's got no like what even is the moral relevance of having one? Like what special abilities does it give a person, or what? Like there isn't anything significant. And I was really trying to like figure this out with somebody that I was more so for more so to like further my own like activism and to find out what these arguments are so that I can
mhm,
like progress as an activist. I was like genuinely like intrigued, like, okay, what does this mean? It was kind of like a bit of a learning experience for me recently.
mhm.
And yeah, it just like I don't know, it's just like not adding up to me. I mean, the more activism I do with religious people, the more of I used to identify as agnostic, but like I'm becoming slowly more atheist because it's sounding more and more
Yeah.
ridiculous to me.
That's the thing is like I I'm fine with people believing what they want to believe. The problem is almost always when people believe things that aren't proven or when things are faith based, they're usually irrational,
Mm,
and that usually leads to harm or a, a lack of progress, right? So
mm,
if you like, sure, in theory, on paper, somebody could believe in something, right? That's totally faith based, um, and it'd be personal, and they do that. But if you think about it, if you have that, if you accept things that are faith based, you're the way that you think, you're not going to be a progressive thinker, right? You're
mm,
usually going to be selective in what science you support. You're not going to like be completely receptive to change in
mm,
ideas or change of traditions, or it just so like yeah, I've been atheist for a very long time, not just because I don't think God exists for a lot of reasons, but regardless of like spirituality, which is spirituality is a little different. I am like very, and I don't know, but I'm gonna say it. I'm like very against religion. All
mm,
religions, like organized religion, I think has been one of the most damaging things to equality, to progress, to science, to anything that will make the world better for the most amount of people. Um,
yeah.
and that's a hard line statement, but I really, the more that I talk to people who are religious, the more that well, if we look at the history with organized religions, I mean, the amount of wars and the amount of it's just crazy. Right now, there's I don't want to get into that, but there's a religious war now. Like it's just, it is just so insane to me how people will fight and cling on to something that they don't even know is true or not. Like it's
Yeah. Do you think that people? I mean, my theory is that, it gives people like an identity, like it's a sense of community. They go and celebrate, and it's something, that's what it gives them. And I suppose you could kind of say that veganism does that for us. But yeah, I think that that's probably one benefit of religion, but I think that it probably causes a lot more harm than it does good, to be fair.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons why people are spiritual, why people believe in certain things, and they're not like, there are pros to being spiritual, to having religion. Like, I'm not gonna say that like all aspects of religion or all aspects of spirituality is negative. I think that there is a lot of value in having faith, or having even an agnosticism as to what happens when you die, or how we got here, because life is very scary, and it's me as an atheist, I believe that everything goes black and you're done for. But that's fucking terrifying. Like, I wish I could kind of be a little more spiritual. I wish I had that kind of openness to go, you know what? I don't know, and I want to, like, almost like an imagination, almost like a hoping for more. I just don't. I just don't. I've tried. I just don't. I can't. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's because my parents are atheist and we just kind of grew up that way. I don't know. But I feel like I'd be a little more comforted, or maybe less cynical if I had a little more spirituality in my life. But that's a whole separate conversation. But yeah. Now, I do want to ask. I mean, there are still people here, so thank you everybody if you've been here the whole time or if you're joining. Are there any questions? I just want to make sure, because this is all about activism. If all of you are already doing outreach, that's awesome. I'm assuming it's mostly vegans here. But if you have any questions on how to get started or anything we've talked about so far, please put them in the chat. I'm watching. I'm looking at the chat. So yeah, I'll just put that in there. We'll give it a little more time. But yeah, anything that you wanted to talk about, Jem, in particular? Did you have any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose maybe one like topic of conversation that I've been thinking about quite recently is getting through to like certain types of people. And I don't know if you yourself find that you're more successful like outreaching like a certain type of person, or like a certain like demographic or something.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're more successful with that, because like you said earlier, we need to have as many people as possible online, and we all need to be like singing the same message, and spreading that out and stuff. And part of the reason for that is that I think that some people can get through to people that I couldn't get through to. And for me, I find that personally I tend to hit a brick wall a lot with when it comes to like men, especially
Mm.
like especially like more like not maybe like older, but like maybe like old fashioned kind
Mm-hmm.
of, because of my gender and my appearance. And I think that there's a lot of advantages being, all of us activists we're all different in the fact that we're all unique. We've all got our own different styles, but then also we're from different backgrounds as well. And I think that it can work in our advantage some ways. So, for example, I think that I can probably get away with saying more than maybe some like a man could get away with saying to another man, because I'm not seen as or perceived as like as much as a threat. But then at the same time, I think that sometimes I wouldn't get necessarily taken as seriously as like they would take another man, because it's kind of like they kind of, because I'm quite small and
Mm-hmm.
like petite female. And I think that sometimes, and it's not a lot of men, it's only those who are, I would say, more so like they come across as like a little bit like fragile in a way, because
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to take on a message from somebody that they, this is just my
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
my like thinking. I might be wrong, but I think that it's difficult for them. They need like an authoritative figure to, someone that they look up to and admire to like.
Well, think about like how
Build a
big
message.
Andrew Tate has gotten, right? Andrew
Mm,
Tate, Jordan Peterson. Like, I think that nowadays we are seeing this explosion or this like resurgence of like really extreme, like masculine or like
Alpha.
a really extreme message of what masculinity should be, right? And I
Yeah.
think that that message, to your point, parts of that message or like this traditional gender role of like what a man is comes from
Hmm.
the old fat. It comes from people from that time period, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, and I to your point, like I do find that women activists they usually get away with like talking to younger teens or children more. Like,
Hmm.
like for a good example,
Yeah.
Cash Peterson will talk to kids. Nobody says anything. Her boyfriend talks to
Hmm.
kids. He's a pedophile, and I
Yeah.
find that is interesting. Same thing with me. Like if I interview some teenagers who, by the way, come up to me because they want to talk. Some people think I like hold them hostage or something. They like approach me, but all of a sudden I'm like harassing kids, But like somebody who's maybe a woman who's smaller that isn't really seen as a threat as much. But like where I do activism, I can't imagine a smaller person like my fiance. She's 5'3", 100, whatever pounds, and I can't imagine her being in front of the bars at night talking to, like who knows, like it's unfortunately we should all be able to be treated equals, but a lot of people
Hmm.
still have this old way of thinking, or oh, you're a small woman, so I'm not going to take you seriously, or I'm a big man, so I must be a predator or something. Like there's this
Yeah.
weird
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always a disadvantage. Obviously, it has its perks, like I said, but I think sometimes I do tend to like hit a wall
Hmm.
with some people because they can't take the message or like the message just doesn't get through to them. And I mean, it's probably the same for everybody. There's just certain types of people that they won't be able to get through to.
Yeah, and honestly, like what I would honestly recommend is focus on the people that you can get through to, right? Like if you know
Mhm.
that like men over the age of 50 don't take you seriously, don't waste your time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is like um and I know it's hard, like even me, I will entertain a troll even though I know, but I like there's part of me that like has hope that's like okay, maybe they're not trolls, maybe if I whatever, right? But yeah, that's the thing is like if there's a guy or a person who's not taking you seriously because of your gender or because of your
Mhm.
size, they're definitely not going to understand the vegan message. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And that actually, CDA Activism asked a question. He asked, "What's your thoughts on intersectional veganism?" Which I think is a good segue. In terms of intersectional veganism, are you talking about how veganism is connected to other forms of discrimination, or are you talking about vegan activists that are like, if you're not talking about what's happening elsewhere with humans, you're not really vegan? Um, I think you're asking about the second one because I think Jem, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we both agree that the discrimination that animals face um, is the same kind of discrimination that leads to racism, sexism,
Mm.
homophobia. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So yeah, that I think is pretty obvious to most people here. But in terms of like this idea that like um, you have to speak up about human rights issues, otherwise you're not a vegan or like you're doing a disservice of some kind. I find that very silly. I find that silly for a couple reasons. Number one, most human rights issues or most human rights like activists, whether it be against racism, against sexism, whatever, or against a certain conflict, um, most of them, if not all of them, aren't vegan. So, like, I find it funny how people will be like, okay, they will hold us accountable. Like, they'll hold us to a standard of, okay, well, sure, you're talking about animals, but you have to be talking about other humans. Otherwise, you're like a bad person. But if we were to go to them and say, okay, you're advocating for Black Lives Matter, you're advocating for some other issue, but you're not vegan, oh, you're a hypocrite, right? We don't hold human rights issues or human rights activists to that standard, because that's kind of pulling like an all lives matter thing, right? I think it's okay to focus on a certain issue and have that be the main thing you advocate for. But at the same time, obviously I would say most vegans, if not all vegans, aren't racist or sexist. It's kind of hard to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, on the surface, intersectionality, the actual, like, if you look back at its roots and its definition, I think that it's a nice idea, because initially it stems from the fact that, we should, as vegans, be inclusive, and we shouldn't oppress anybody, within our movement. But then, yeah, it shouldn't be used as like a tool to discredit or, the vegan movement. And I don't think, yeah, I read a post on an intersections page recently, and it was just like saying something like, if you're vegan and you don't speak out for any other injustice, then your activism is completely worthless to me. And I was just like, well, okay, there's a couple of problems there. So first of all, like, it's not activism for you. Like, we're speaking out for non-human animals, so it doesn't
Right.
matter if it's like useful to you or not. But then also the other issue is that, like, why would the activism for the animals be any less valuable
Mm-hmm.
just because we're not speaking out against other issues as well? Because there's so many different issues that, there's always going to be an issue that we're
Mm-hmm.
not talking about.
Yeah, you can't do everything. And it almost seems
Exactly.
like a speciesist position, like, okay, you can be a human rights activist and not speak out for animals. But if you're speaking out for animals, you better be a human rights activist as well. Like, animals,
Yeah.
I think, deserve their own space. Like, they are, I would say, as of this point, the most oppressed and most neglected group of individuals on the planet. And they
Mm-hmm.
kind of need their own space. Like, every conversation when we talk about animals can't also include humans, because
No.
we are the like and again, if everyone were vegan, maybe I'd have maybe a slightly different attitude, right? If everyone was vegan and there's some kind of mass genocide or like some horrible oppression happening to a group of humans, yeah, maybe at that point I would definitely fight harder for those people in addition to animals or something, but like, when 98% of the world is contributing to what I am trying to fight against and fight for animals, it seems very silly. It seems like a lot of lip service and a lot
Yeah.
of this, like, I don't know, like, I feel like people are just like afraid to be like called a racist or something. I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like, people are like afraid to like not be speaking out against everything all the time or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it's like the biggest form of oppression. Like, it's got the most victims, and not only that, but it's got the least amount of support. Like, if you think about, like, vegans, what percentage of vegans are actually active? And there's so many, like, vegans that I know that don't speak out for animals, but they'll go to like a Palestine march, or they'll go and do some other form of activism for a different group. But I've always said that, when this injustice has like the least amount of people speaking out for it, why would I spend any time on anything else that already has like 10 times more support? Like, well, more than that, and a lot more funding and like financial support. So it's just like, it seems like silly to me. Why would I do that when this is like what needs my attention the most?
Yeah, and also, like, when we're talking about political issues or we're talking about like speaking out, like, they're usually pretty complex. Like, anybody that talks about a human rights issue or a political issue specifically in a very black and white way usually have it wrong in some way. Like, it's usually pretty nuanced. There's different laws, there's different bodies, there's usually both groups are wrong and right in different ways. Like, it's pretty gray. And for me, unless I know I'm 100% confident, or I'm like contributing to it in one way, I'm not like if I'm contributing to something that I'm against, I'm gonna change, right? Or if I
Yeah.
know that I am confident that like one guy is a bad guy and the other one isn't, and I know that I can make a difference, I'm gonna do that, right?
Hmm.
But otherwise, like political issues are pretty gray. Like exploiting animals are innocent. They're literally
Yeah.
like children, right? So
Mm.
this is something that everybody can actually change. Like they have the individual power to stop this.
Hmm.
It's not like, a war or other things where, yeah, protests do like raising awareness, reposting, that does help. But at the end of the day, it's though, different governments negotiating and fighting each other. It's a lot less in our control.
Hmm.
So I think there's a couple things, but I think CDA Activism added a good comment. He said, pretty much like we're not gonna like making the animal rights movement about humans in
Mm.
any way is doing a huge disservice because everything's already about humans, right? Like the
Yeah.
animal rights thing is like, okay, let's stop thinking about humans for 1 second and let's think about others. And
Yeah.
any ounce of like, well, what about humans? It defeats the purpose. It defeats the point of what we're doing.
Yeah. 100%. Totally agree.
Um, But I mean, this has been great talk. I mean, we got almost 2 hours. I think we'll probably wrap it up. I really do want to thank you for joining, Jem. That was great.
Yeah.
I'm,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear we have a lot of things in common when it comes to activism. Everybody, click on her channel in the live stream, or what is it? Is it Jem underscore lettuce or just Jem lettuce or what's your channel?
Um, I think it's Gem dot lettuce.
Okay, all right. Look up Jem lettuce. You'll find her. So
I'm on
definitely.
YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Although TikTok is,
The
yeah,
worst. Yeah. So
different
so
story.
follow Jem. Please follow me if you have logical consistency. I appreciate everybody for hanging out. And yeah, anything you want to close off with, Jem?
No, just thank you very much for having me. It's been really cool. Yeah, live streams are fairly new to me, so it's nice to, yeah, it's nice to experience and hopefully do some more of these in future. So
Yeah, live
thank you.
streams are awesome. It's hard because they're like time consuming. Like you have to do it at this amount of time and like
Mm.
so it's kind of tough to organize. So hence why I'm always late. So I apologize again for postponing. But
Ah, don't worry.
thank you again, Jem. Thank you everybody for watching, and see you guys later.